So, welcome from different parts of the world. Really nice to see some of you I haven't seen for quite a long time. So, yeah, it's something that you may not have noticed depending on your personal interests. But for me, every 4 years is a particular cycle where there's a lot of sport. I don't have a TV, so I catch bits of it at friends' houses or YouTube or whatever. Um, But there's a summer of sports, starting with the football, the Euros, and then the tennis, particularly Wimbledon, and then the sort of pre-Olympic athletics, all that, and then the Olympics themselves. And I just been noticing a couple of things. If you like, that some of the qualities that appear, particularly I've been noticing in the Olympic competitors, and for some of you this may be like, oh no, not more sport, and others you may be a little bit interested, but it's really just from the practice perspective of what can be learned. And I think there are many qualities in many different sports, and a lot of them are very consistent through the sports. But the one I wanted to pick up, which we talk about quite a lot in this practice, is the quality of energy or effort, right? Energy or effort, and particularly persistence, patiently persevering, patiently persisting. And in the Olympics, that might be the runner who maybe falls, maybe gets knocked down. So they're at the back of the pack of runners, but they get up and they just keep going. And against all the odds, they manage to, place really well or even win the race. So there's a lot of talent, a lot of skill, but there's also incredible amount of determination and persistence on display. I think really obvious to see. Um, One of my favorite sports, and this is because I did it as a kid, was gymnastics. And the what I know from a little bit from my own experience, but much more from hearing about it, is that they train for thousands and thousands of hours, to keep going, to develop that persistence. You fall off or you wobble, even, but often you fall off a piece of apparatus and you just get back on. The training is to just get straight back on, finish what you started, finish the routine. And it becomes quite automatic, this attitude of keeping going, of not giving up, not turning your attention elsewhere, maybe inwards to that you feel awful in that moment, but just keeping going, even if you're bruised or sore or shaken up. And in meditation, the wobbles are perhaps mostly more internal. Sometimes there's physical pain and difficulty, um, but often it's more the stories, the big stories that erupt in meditation, or the emotions that get going. Sometimes it's a lack of confidence or doubt in, what am I doing here? I don't really think it's having any effect. Or what's the point? What's the point kind of mind? Or there's sometimes a lack of motivation, isn't it? It's just not quite connecting with what's happening. And we can keep going like that for quite a long time, but there isn't much there isn't much sort of really motivated persistence in the can't be bothered mind. I've talked about can't be bothered mind quite a bit. Certainly one that has been a bit of a favorite for me to work with for a while, for a long time, actually, much less so these days. So one of the key parts of this mindfulness practice is we train in staying aware of what's happening, and whatever that is, whether it's the lack of motivation, whether it's the big story, whatever it is, idea is not to switch immediately to something else to try and deal with what's happening, but to use awareness, if you like, to be with it, to accompany it, even when it's quite an agitating sort of mind, or a dull mind, or one where you start to believe the thoughts that says there's nothing valuable in this mind state. But first of all, we want to just be aware of it. It's very easy to switch really quickly to trying to do something about it. But having the attitude, it's enough for this is what's happening. It's enough for this to be known, to be a little bit interested in what's happening here. So something else that I've noticed in the Olympic gymnastics, and this happened a few days ago with one of the British competitors, but it's happened a few times, is that the score seems particularly low. You think someone's doing really well. The commentators think someone's doing well, but they get quite a low score. It seems unfair. It seems unexpected. It's really disappointing because it puts them outside the medal contention. And there's a process where you can question what's happening, but it's quite limited. Usually the judge's decision is what happens, and you have to accept that and just carry on. So I think this is where the wisdom practice, the wisdom aspect of mindfulness practice particularly comes in regard to acceptance, accepting what's happening, accepting that we can't control what other people do. We can't control what happens. We have our own sort of remit, if you like, our own sort of sphere of influence and control. And maybe there are limited things that we can do externally, but really, initially, it's about accepting this is what has happened. This is what's in the mind right now. This is what the experience is right now. And that in itself, the fact that there's an experience happening right now has its own value. I think it's Joseph Goldstein who says, wisdom understands that each moment has equal value. So not even that each moment has value, but that each moment has equal value, because wisdom understands that this is a moment of experience, far less interested in the content of that experience, but in the recognition that this is a moment of experience. Though we also, we do recognize what's happening. Training in recognizing, really persistently recognizing when there's identification with experience. When we identify with what's happening, there's a lack of true acceptance of what's happening. There's a lack of clear seeing, the type of acceptance which is of clear seeing, which is of happening. There isn't an arguing with the reality of what's happening, and there isn't a sort of collapsing into it. Oh, poor me that this is happening to me, or this shouldn't be happening to me, one of those two things. So that right effort, right persistence, keeping going quality, that's one of the main things that we need to do, is to keep going. Some of you know I talked about this lockdown song that became, well, I think it didn't become very popular, but I certainly noticed it, called the Keep Going On song, by a duo called the Bengsons. And it's that has that quality to keep going on. So maybe that's all I'll say this morning. We'll have a meditation. So if you'd like to set yourselves up for the practice.